morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this informative webinar. It's great to see some new and familiar faces. My name is Emily Cole, and I'm also joined by my colleague Alex. We're both part of the behind-the-scenes team at Yellow Day. Yellow Day support organisations with learning and development across lots of topics, including EDI, leadership, personal development, wellbeing, and IT skills. Today, we're really excited to be joined by our colleagues Katie and Roger, who we've collaborated with for a few years now on facilitating engaging, relevant and tailored wellbeing, menopause awareness and leadership development training sessions for our clients. Just to make you aware, this session is being recorded, but we will stop the recording before the Q&A. I'll now hand over to Katie and Roger, and once again, thank you for coming along.
We are here today to talk about supporting people at menopause. And we'll find out why this is an important topic in due course, but it's become increasingly, clearly it's an important one from many points of view, but it's become increasingly important because of the change in government legislation, which actually requires larger organisations to educate and support their people going through menopause and various other things, of course, as well. So we'll also talk about midlife as we go on. Because respecting everybody in the work, well, everybody everywhere, it's also important we think about other people as well as those going through the potential of menopause. So let's get going. So our agenda today will look at the ethical, the legal and the business case for supporting people. But we always say there's only really one good reason for supporting people, and that's just the right thing to do. Why wouldn't you? You've got fantastic people working with you, and it's just logical that you'd support them. But there are ethical, legal, and business reasons for it as well. We'll talk around what your experience has been about working with people, or even maybe in your other parts of your life, people with menopause. We'll look at what is the menopause. What's it all about? What sort of things might you expect to see? We'll have a chat about what we can do about it internally, which, as I've mentioned already, is increasingly important, and from April next year will become a legal obligation on larger organisations. And then invite you to think about what you might do as a result of being with us for this very, very short session today. And then we will throw it open to Q&A at the end. So let's get going. During the talk, we'll refer to symptoms when we're talking about menopause and midlife. Of course, menopause is not a disease, but symptoms is a good shorthand to describe the sort of thing that may happen to someone that's going through this natural midlife transition. We'll reference things related to sex, mental well-being, and there'll be oblique references to suicide. So if you feel you might be triggered by any of these, then please feel free to avoid them. We'll refer to women, men, male, female, and probably other terms that we respect everybody's identity and certainly don't mean to offend anybody in any way in what we say. We would ask you to maintain confidentiality. Obviously, that only applies to the breakouts and the discussion bits and the Q&A so that we can share and ask questions that we really want to do. And we don't really need to say this, but we always do. All conversations should be supportive and inclusive and obviously non-judgmental.
Our favourite quotes from David Bowie: aging is that extraordinary process where you become the person you always should have been. So there is something really liberating about getting older, and certainly as a postmenopausal woman, I think I'm probably at my most potent now because I'm no longer dictated to by my hormones. So there is something really positive about getting older and moving through that menopausal transition process and coming out the other side. So it's about, as an employee and as an employer, thinking about yourself and other people from a different perspective. So rather than seeing people as getting older and therefore coming towards the end, actually think of them as the most powerful and potent they've ever been, and how can you utilize their skills and talents for themselves and for the organization moving forward.
And of course, if we think of menopause and midlife in general, it's kind of in the definition, isn't it? These days, fortunately, lifespan is increasing. So around midlife, around 50 years old, you could well have around half of your life left. So, clearly we don't want, we want to make the most of it. So we're just going to have a quick breakout session in small groups, and we'd ask you to have a discussion with your colleagues in those small groups of, are you aware of anyone going through the menopause? It might be you, or it might be a member of family or something. What have you observed that makes you think it's the menopause? Maybe they've actually said it's the menopause, or you've said it's the menopause. And what sort of things are you noticing in people? So why should we bother to support people? Well, I covered that at the beginning to just as a passing comment. It's just the right thing to do. But there are reasons. If we look at, these are actually European data, if we look at the split of the population, just over half of the population is female. And of that, roughly half, almost 2/3 are in the critical midlife phase. We would call that between the ages of 40 and 60. And I can hear people almost thinking 40 to 60, that's a huge amount out of life. Well, yeah, it is. And Katie will cover in a while, a little, very, very briefly because of time, why the span is so great. So there is a legal case for supporting people. There was a lot of talk, and we were involved in that in Parliament a few years back, about making it a legal requirement and making menopause a protected characteristic, which didn't go through. However, it is covered under various acts of Parliament. You can see some of them there. The one through which most successful tribunals are won is the Equalities Act 2010. And the Equalities Act looks at it as a physical, you can see at the bottom, a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term effect, negative effect on your ability to do your normal daily activities. Of course, that includes work. And long-term is generally regarded to be certainly more than 6 months, but probably 12 months or more. So that's the one under which most of tribunals are successful. And here are some examples of tribunals. We haven't done an exhaustive search of the legal literature, needless to say. The first one that we came across of significance was Merchant versus British Telecom in 2012. So you think about that as 14 years ago, it's a very, very long time ago. And the most recent that we consider at the moment worthy of discussion is Karen Farquharson, now a few years back. The interesting thing about her claim was her employer was very reticent to admit failure, and so there were extra charges awarded against them because of their delay. It was only a few £1,000s, but it did open the door to larger claims in the future if employers take a long time to admit their responsibility. Obviously, we want to avoid going to tribunals, and that's why we want to upskill, raise awareness, and train everybody, and particularly our managers. There is clearly a business case. Someone around those midlife years, let's say 50 plus or minus, they've probably been with the organization for a long time. They've probably got a lot of knowledge, skill, and experience of the organization and its clients and service users and colleagues and everything else, and the way that the business works. And to lose them due to a temporary phase, a natural temporary phase in life, would seem to be rather a tragic loss, when it just means working together to find reasonable adjustments. You can see the statistics there. I think the interesting one is for every £1 spent on women's health, and I imagine that would apply equally to health, the return on investment is over tenfold. And there have been so many bits of research as to how many women are affected by what, but in our experience over the last 12 years or so, most women are affected to a greater or lesser extent by going through this natural phase of life. Some of them will feel less able to do their job, but will carry on. Some may change their role because they don't feel they can carry on in that role during the menopausal transition. And some may actually drop out of working at all, which is a great loss for the organisation and for society and for their family and for them, which is rather tragic.
But if you think of the impact that it might have within the working environment, women were asked, what impact does that have negatively? And you can see that the whole list there. Interestingly, sleep disturbances further down at 37%. that anybody who's lost sleep for a prolonged period of time, whether that's due to a baby or indeed a puppy, anything that keeps you awake at night for a prolonged period of time will know, regardless of age or biological gender, how quickly that starts to have a negative impact on how you show up in the world. It has an impact on your levels of concentration, on you're likely to be more irritable, it will lower your immune system. So prolonged sleep disturbance for anybody very quickly starts to have a negative impact on how we show up in the world. But you'll see all of those there of how women can feel, and not all of them will, but how it can impact people. About 1 in 4 women, to about 25%, will sail through the menopause and wonder what all the fuss is about. But then they have a similar experience of their hormones from puberty onwards. About 2 in 4, so roughly 50%, will have moderate to occasionally severe experiences. And 1 in 4 will be on the edge for the whole transition. So really, really struggle. And you think, well, that's only 25%. Why bother? But 25% of a considerable millions of women, that's an awful lot of women who are really, really struggling. And I was one of those. So I'm also proof that there is a way through it. And once you found the way to navigate it for yourself in the most appropriate way, there is a way through this transition. So when women said, well, what do you want to have happen at work then? And you can see actually the fourth one down, management awareness, 3/4 said we want managers to be aware of what is happening. And that is so important so they can have those discussions at work without feeling embarrassed. So it is really, really important. You'll see all of the others there, but that one particularly with what's coming, which will be mandatory from April next year. So about a year, or less than a year now, there will be no option for organisations that have more than 250 employees. And that is so, so important, because if you get that bit in place, actually the whole culture of the business will shift. So it's hugely important. So very briefly, a little bit about my experience of going through the menopause. I didn't do that when I was 5 years old. I went through puberty at 5 years old, but that's for another course when we have more time. But I was in the 1 in 4 that really, really struggled through the whole transition. And the impact that had on me from a working perspective is that my confidence went from here to here. It felt in 24 hours, 48 hours maximum. I lost the ability to be able to speak up in meetings because I didn't think I had anything worthwhile to contribute. And if I did, I couldn't remember what it was anyway, because the memory was completely shot to bits. My mood was all over the place. My sleep was all over the place. I probably had 20 to 30 hot flushes a day. So managing that and the impact it had on my self-esteem and my confidence was huge, absolutely huge. I thought I was losing my mind. And when I was going through that, I didn't know it was the perimenopause that was causing it. I just thought I was losing my mind. And because I didn't know what was happening to me, I couldn't explain it to the people around me. So they just saw the person they thought they knew transforming into somebody they no longer recognized. And none of us had any idea why. And it got to the point where, my whole body was aching, everything. And I thought, well, this is not going to get any better, is it? And it got to the point where I was researching suicide because I was at such a low ebb. It had such a huge impact on my mental health, which more and more evidence is coming out, and quite a lot in the last 12 months, of that this can be, the impact on our emotional well-being can be the most discombobulating for a lot of women. Because a lot of women will expect hot flushes, they expect their body to get a bit creaky, but the impact on their mental health is a bit that they don't expect and they don't see coming. So that's the bit that can derail them, and that's the one bit that nearly derailed me. So for the women who are really, really struggling, that 25% and even the 50% where they may not be feeling like that all the time, but every now and again it's going to be like a tsunami, they'll suddenly be hit by it. It's a huge issue. So it is something that needs to be brought out into the open and discussed. Yeah, just very quickly, some of the menopause symptoms, we kind of go around. You've got the depressed at the top, the bloated, where clothes are shrinking in the wardrobe overnight without us doing anything to help that process, the forgetfulness, the irritability, the itchiness, the sleepiness, the snappiness, and the hot flushes, and the one in the middle, I am losing control of who I am. And it can be, there are now over 50 potential symptoms of the menopause. Not every woman is going to have all of them, and they're not going to turn up every day. But that's the variety of things that women may experience as they're going through the menopausal transition. So what is your experience? Have you, just very quickly, we'll open it up to anybody who wants to share. Have you tried discussing the menopause with anybody? Ideally in a workplace environment, how did you approach it and how did it go? So if anybody who's had that experience, feel free just to quickly shout out and share how that went. So what could organisations do? Well, I mean, a lot of organisations, certainly post-COVID, already have flexible and agile working, hybrid working. Sometimes it's, remotely, and sometimes you come into the office. A lot of people, it's all working from home now. But could there be flexibility and agility in the standard working hours? It could be 9 to 5 is your standard working hours. Could that be altered slightly? So if you've had a really, really bad night, is there ability to start a bit later and carry on a bit later? If you're working from home, that's easier to do, of course. But some people, of course, you can't do that. People on reception or, shift is very difficult. So just think about how flexible you could be. What else could you do to build in that agility? What are those reasonable adjustments? What is obvious? And a lot of reasonable adjustments actually are common sense and don't cost any money. And a lot of organisations are frightened that this is going to be too expensive. We haven't got the money, the budget to do this. Actually, a lot of them are just common sense. If people are working in an office, is there somewhere they can go when they're feeling overwhelmed just to recalibrate that isn't a cubicle in the nearest loo? It's kind of obvious things, really. People who might be out on the road. What could you put in place for them if their job is actually driving around a city or an area? What could you put in place to give them easy access to loos when they're on the road? We had actually somebody from an organisation that is currently online now who said to us at the end, this was years ago, oh my goodness, actually I can open up all of the care homes in the area and make it possible for anybody whose job is to go on the road to go to the nearest care home. So they've got free parking, they can go in and they've got a clean and accessible loo that they can use. I can do that immediately, and I will do that immediately. So sometimes it can be really common sense and really, really easy and not cost any money whatsoever. So think about what could you do that makes it easier for people to be able to manage it when they're having a bad time. And thinking about the culture, really interesting. Well, I'm not going to read through all of those, but it was really interesting. We worked with Timpson. You may know them if you have keys cut or your duvet cleaned or your shoes being healed. And in 2019, on World Menopause Awareness Day, the CEO, James Timpson, said anybody who needs to pay for their hormone replacement therapy can claim that cost back via the company. So you can imagine that went viral. And I spoke to Laura, who was their wellbeing, and she said, the amount of organisations, Katie, who've approached me, who have asked for a copy of my menopause policy, and I feel slightly embarrassed because we don't have one. I said, that's because you don't need one. Because the culture in your organisation is so good, you don't need policies because everybody does the right thing automatically. So in the full course, we actually talk about don't do a knee-jerk reaction with a policy thinking about your objectives and why do you need it, because a policy isn't going to change culture if that's the only thing you're doing. So think about the culture, think about what could you do to shift that culture for everybody, not just for people going through menopause, but for everybody.
So okay, it's all very well turning up today, and thank you very much for sparing your valuable time to be with us. But what are we going to do as a result? This is kind of a very, very, very brief checklist of things to think about. As Katie mentioned, having policies and guidelines and things like that can be really important for organisations. It gives a reference point and things to work to, but actually the way to implement it is by upskilling and educating and informing people. Under the new regulations, there will be a requirement to evidence what you're doing, and things like audits of policies, sickness reporting. Is menopause, for example, something that a woman can put on the sickness reporting rather than just having to say that she was, had a dodgy curry last night or something? Raising awareness of menopause and midlife, there is a specific focus on menopause, but we would argue that it's important to look after everybody, whoever they are. For all staff is really important. There will be a requirement specific for specific training for managers around the menopause awareness, reasonable adjustments, how to open that conversation and having that conversation with a colleague. And of course, supporting staff experiencing the menopause transition. And our course Menopause Demystified, which Katie runs. And of course, all of our courses in this area are CPD accredited. So if people are interested in accumulating CPD points, which I am, for example, it can be quite nice to get 3 or 4 more by going on a half-day course. So there's some of the things that you can do. There are many, many others, of course, but just briefly, and just to share with you, we have some free resources that are open to everyone. We have a free e-magazine. The next copy is currently in production. You can see a copy there. If you feel you might be interested in that, you can pop us an email to the address at the bottom there, or you can contact Yellow Day, and I'm sure they'll pass on your details. We have some free monthly online courses, talks over Zoom with our clinical partners. It alternates between Professor Talaulika, who's a menopause expert, and other professionals who may be medical or non-medical. We've had CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. We've had an assortment of other non-medical things. And if you're interested in that, they are free and open to everybody. But you do have to register through Ticket Tailor. There's the QR code there if you wish to scan it. We have a free lifestyle factors and menopause leaflet. You can see it there. It's free to download. We do not collect any information from you. All we collect is the number of clicks, how many times it's been downloaded. So if you are interested in sharing that, then please share the link. Don't share the document, because then we'll have an idea of how many people have used it. And we do also offer the facility of customizing that for organizations. We've had some organizations that want to put a different cover on it, that want to put an introduction from the CEO or the head of HR or the head of wellbeing or something. And it's a PDF, so we're happy to do that for people. So that's the end of our formal presentation. Spot on 40 minutes. Well,
thank you so much, Katie and Roger, for a really informative session, and thank you to everybody for participating and offering your experiences and opinions. It's been a really valuable way to spend the morning. If there's any further information you'd like from us about any of the support that Katie and Roger could provide your organisation, please don't hesitate to get in touch, and please subscribe to our newsletter so that you're invited to our next events. Thanks.